Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6 p.m. I have it exactly. Jessica, would you please do roll call?
Absolutely. Joe Kishinary and Michael Bean had previously communicated their absence, so just a heads up. Brittany de Alicante.
Sorry, I was struggling with the mute button. I am here.
Hi there. Barry Lind.
Here.
Jonathan Hayes. Carla Berg.
Here.
Welcome. Terry Dillon.
Present.
Adam Jenkins.
Here.
Jen McCauley.
Here.
And Eric Adams.
Present.
And roll call is complete.
Perfect. Wanted to begin just with a word of welcome. I think we have two of our three new committee members with us tonight, Adam and Carla. Thank you for joining us. We're grateful to have you as a part of the team. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. Are you okay with just introducing yourself briefly? Whatever you want to say, we just want to welcome you and thank you for being a part of the team here, but it'd be fun to get a chance just to meet you briefly.
Hey, everybody, I'm Carla Berg. I have lived in Springfield now about 30 years, and I'm just super excited to be here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Adam Jenkins. I think officially bought a house in 2007 here, but been in the Eugene Springfield area since 2000. Again, happy to be here as well. I'm glad to be part of this and help support our community in both the neighborhoods and our schools and everything for our kids.
So again, so grateful. Thank you, both of you, and we'll get a chance down the road, I'm sure, to meet Jonathan. And right, Jessica, Jonathan's not with us tonight.
Not at this point. I'm just doing a little searching in the back.
Okay, if he jumps in, we'll welcome him as well and give him that opportunity as well. But again, thank you everyone for being here tonight. Want to start with just the approval of the minutes. If you've had a chance to look at them, do you have any corrections or adjustments that need to be made? And if not, would someone make a motion to approve those minutes? First of all, I should ask the question, any corrections? Okay.
You know me, Miss Corrections here. But I'll make a motion.
Say that again, Terry.
I said, you know me, Miss Corrections right here. So, but it looked great.
Okay.
So I make a motion that we accept them as written.
Well, I appreciate you looking through them thoroughly. I really do. Thank you for that. And so Terry's made a motion. Would someone second that?
Yeah, I can second the motion.
Perfect. Thank you, Brittany. All in favor of the minutes being approved, raise your hand. That'll be easiest for me, maybe. Thank you. There. All right, we are unanimously approved the minutes. Thank you so much. We'll move on in the agenda to business from the audience, and we have been now for many months inviting the audience to participate in our meetings, and sometimes there's a great deal of response and sometimes not as much. There's a script that I read just so everyone's familiar with how this works, so I'm going to take a moment and do that. But to those listening online and a part of this meeting from the audience, we're grateful for you as well. As a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. The committee will listen to your comments, but will not respond to public comment until the committee response portion of the meeting agenda. Meeting minutes will be taken by staff and forwarded to city manager and city council. Members of the public can always send written testimony to the committee or city council. As we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask members of the audience to please keep yourself on mute until you're called to provide public testimony. Public testimony will allow speakers 2 minutes each for a total of 20 minutes If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either one of those times, please use the raise hand feature to make your request. You will be called on when it's your turn to speak. Please identify your name, Springfield ward number, and subject you would like to speak about. For people calling in by phone only, you are in listen mode only and cannot be called upon. So at that time, I would open it up to if there is any comments from the audience, business from the audience.
Yes, we have a member of the community indicating she'd like to speak. It's Barbara Penny. And oh, unfortunately, and now she has the ability to speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Dr. Barbara Kenny and I live near Leeburg. I'd like to comment on the January 2nd incident with Springfield Police and the individual with fireworks that was reported in the Register Guard, KEZI, and in a Springfield Police Department press release. From the reporting, it appears that officers tried using less lethal tools to take the individual into custody, but that was not effective. And then later in the reporting, it states that the individual was taken into custody and then transported to a local hospital for a pre-existing medical condition that was unrelated to the incident. The reporting also noted that the officers involved had their hearing impacted by the noise of the detonated fireworks, but it was not mentioned if any of the officers had to seek medical attention for this. The report of initially attempting to use less lethal tools is promising, and I sincerely appreciate that. I'm also grateful that no one lost their life during this incident and that the officers created an opportunity for a better outcome. However, the complete story isn't clear from this initial reporting. If the deployment of less lethal tools, which they themselves weren't described, didn't work, but the individual was eventually taken into custody, how was that accomplished? Was force necessary for the arrest? And if so, at what level? Did any of the officers need medical attention for potential hearing damage? Will this event be administratively reviewed internally by the Force Review Committee for adherence to policy and to gain training insights? Answering these types of questions as part of the press release would help increase the transparency that the department is striving for. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
And that is the only member of the community that indicated they would like to speak this evening at this time.
So I appreciate the comment and the questions. Now's a chance for the committee to respond to the one item mentioned from the audience. And I'm opening it up right now if anyone from the committee wants to make a response to that. Okay, then we will move on in the business to committee reports. And at this time, I would invite the chief to share with us.
Oh, sorry, Barry. I think that Chief Shearer maybe had his hand up. I was curious to hear if Chief Shearer was able to respond to some of the comments.
Sorry, I now see the hand, but I didn't see it before, so I apologize for not calling on you.
My turn?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
No, you betcha. No problem at all. Yeah, I appreciate Dr. Kenny and the comments that she made. That was a very tenuous incident. As far as when we put a press release out very early like that, a lot of times we aren't going to have all the facts, or sometimes not be able to share all the facts. We want to get that press release out in as timely a fashion as possible right after the incident occurs. I can tell you that the officers did not have to seek medical treatment, although their hearing was impacted and that was documented. They didn't actually have to seek medical treatment for that. There was not force used essentially after the less lethal was deployed and found to be ineffective. Eventually, the person threw down the explosive device that they had when they were unable to actually ignite it, and were taken into custody without incident at that point. They did get transported to the hospital for a pre-existing condition. In fact, spent some time in the hospital because of that condition before they could be released and booked into jail. But they did not go to hospital as a result of any injuries that were occurred as a direct result of the police interaction with them. I know you had a lot to say in that statement. I think that answered most of the questions there.
I think there was also something about, would it be used as a review or training?
Yes. Absolutely. Every time that we involve in anything, we're always going to debrief it and discuss lessons learned. I think what she's asking about is if this would be something that fell to the level of review of the Force Review Committee. And the way the policy is written, this is not an incident that specifically gets investigated by the Force Review Committee. But that said, it is an incident that we've talked about a lot at roll calls and debrief and tried to learn from. And I can say that the officers used all the tools available. Initially, they tried to communicate. Initially, they tried to use less lethal options. And it was an extremely dangerous situation for the officers involved, and ultimately it ended without anyone really having any significant damage. I think the officers probably were more damaged than the subject was, their hearing potentially, but there wasn't any force used taking them into custody because eventually he surrendered.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your response to that.
Are we ready?
Yes, I was going to go ahead and say, if you're ready for your report, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Sure, we'll do a SPD update to begin with. The first thing I want to talk about is our community survey. So I think, like we've talked about in the past, there is a survey that's been out since I think December 3rd. So between December 3rd and January 3rd, there was a random sample of 7,500 Springfield residences or addresses that were invited to complete the survey. And then after the 3rd, we've since opened it up to the entire Springfield community. We posted it on our website. We posted it on our social media platform, shared a press release. And so now it's open to the entire Springfield residential community to complete that survey. So if you have not done so and you live in the city, we would urge you to do so and share the people that are in your networks to do that as well. Another update, we just promoted 2 sergeants this week, Sergeant Justin Myers and Sergeant Cody Lane. So we're really excited to get them on board and part of the leadership team. And I know they have a lot to offer us, and we're excited to put them to work. And I also want to again give kudos to both Brittany and Terry that came and sat as part of our sergeant's process. We wanted community panelists on each of our community members on each of our multiple panel interviews that we had. And so I really appreciate them and their contribution to that, to making sure that we pick people that absolutely are worthy of leading the men and women of SPD. Then we've got 2 policies I think that we wanted to discuss. One was the employee relationship policy, and the second was the draft of our UAS or drone policy. I'm assuming you've all got those in advance and had a time to review them. I'd be glad to go through both of those and kind of highlight some of what I think are the more interesting topics within them. But if you've got questions about them, I'd be willing to hear those first if you'd like.
Any questions from the committee before Chief would just go through and give us some of the highlights? Trying to make sure I'm not missing a hand raised or anything, because I seem to do that. Yes, Brittany.
All right, I've already been talking lots. I was waiting to see if anyone else was going to want to go first. But I also see, I think that Jonathan is here. So welcome, Jonathan, to the meeting as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Of course. I was just curious. So about the employee relationships policy, I was wondering, it was December. I saw that it said on the document that it was printed December 14th, 2021. Is that when it was most, and I thought it was signed by you, Chief Shearer. So like this was probably updated fairly recently. And yes, I'm curious as to like when it was most recently updated, what was changed and what motivated the change?
Those are great questions. And yes, I signed it into effect on December 14th. That's the day it was printed out, and I put my signature on it. So it was just signed into effect a couple of weeks ago. I think it was largely driven by some of the events that have happened here in SPD over the past year or so, and the need for a complete overhaul of this employee relationship policy. And it has been in the works, like I say, for several months, between, review of the city attorney's office and our bargaining unit and command staff. And there have been multiple discussions going on to get it to where it was something that we all felt confident it would address effectively the employee relationships that may or may not exist in any organization. I think I can go through and kind of hit some of the parts of it I think that are most impactful and productive. On the first page, one of them is employees must inform their direct supervisor whenever they enter into a romantic or intimate relationship with a colleague. That is a requirement. It's not optional. On page 2, the department will not knowingly assign employees who are family members, household members, or intimate partners to any position where you will directly supervise, evaluate, appoint, remove, or potentially discipline the work of that other person, or where the interest could interfere with the performance of any employee's official duties. When it comes to supervisor and subordinate relationships, nobody in a supervisory position can have a romantic or intimate relationship with anybody they directly supervise, and that includes they can't influence anything related to hiring, promotion, termination, discipline, and compensation. Management personnel are prohibited from social interaction with subordinates that might be perceived as inappropriate. Supervisors and command officers are strictly prohibited from entering into a romantic relationship with any subordinate member of the department. And trainer and recruit relationship portion of it, field training officers are essentially coaches that new officers ride with. Even firearms instructors, use of force instructors, driving instructors are prohibited from entering into romantic relationships with any recruit employee. Anybody, again, that is engaged in any kind of a romantic or intimate relationship must immediately notify their direct supervisor or the chief of police. In fact, even prior employee relationships, this is one of the final sections on page 4. A supervisor who's even had a previous romantic relationship with a subordinate employee will not be involved in any decision relating to that person's promotion, raises, termination, or any terms of employment, even if that relationship is over. So I think we've made it I think we've developed a very robust policy that doesn't leave very much room to interpretation on what we will tolerate and what we won't. And I think that's going to best set us up for successes as we move forward. And I don't know how that compares with some of the policies in your workplaces, but I know this is pretty strict.
Was a lot of that not there before and was added, like the relationship, like the kind of strictly forbidding relationships piece, or was that in policy previously?
Well, I don't have the language of the previous one directly in front of me, but I think there was some of that language in there in a similar fashion, but I think it left a little too much room for interpretation. And so we just wanted to tighten that down a little bit to avoid some of that.
Okay. Excellent.
Do we know how this compares to the city of Springfield employee relationship guidelines or requirements?
I know that we were in close contact with human resources and the city attorney. I haven't set it side by side recently with the city policy, but I think it's probably very similar.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this policy?
If nobody has anything else, I have one more, just about the remediation piece. I know it was referencing in this policy, it's referencing another policy. But I was wondering if you could just, if you know off the top of your head, you share it, elaborate a little bit on what remediation for something like this would be like, and who, because usually there's two people involved, but then there's different power dynamics at play, if you know what I'm saying, and how that would be, talked about.
Absolutely. As far as remediation, I think you're referring to if this happens and there is a violation of this policy, how do we address it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and we definitely want to be very conscious of that. And that's part of why we made it very clear that if you're in a supervisory capacity or command staff capacity, it's just not an option for you here. That said, we make it very clear that anybody involved in a relationship with anyone is required to notify their supervisor. So there is an onus on everybody that's involved in these relationships to notify it, so we can take steps to separate them in work groups or whatever it is, so there is no interference, as long as it's not a member of in a supervisory capacity. If somebody were to violate this, I think we would look at it as a violation, just like any other policy. You know, do they have other violations, and it's progressive discipline, and depending on the bargaining unit and what the rules are in place there. But, you know, I think we need to set a standard, and we need to hold people to that standard and hold them accountable to it. And I would also say that people in the command staff ranks and supervisory ranks even are held to a higher standard than they should be for violating any rule, and especially this one.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this before we would move on to the second policy? Okay, I think if you want to, do we want to look at the second policy, the drone team and that policy? Any questions right off the bat, or would you prefer if Chief just goes through and gives us again some of the highlights, and then we can ask questions? I think go for it.
All right. We had a work session on Monday where Sergeant Keetle, who is our lead drone pilot and the supervisor of that unit, we did about an hour-long work session at council on Monday. I don't know if any of you had a chance to see it or not. It was a really good presentation put together by Sergeant Keetle that went into a lot of detail about what are these drones, why do we use them, the restrictions that are in place for law enforcement in particular. What I've got today is I've got our policy. Now, I think just a little background, I think everybody knows what a drone is, or we call them UASs, small unmanned aerial systems. These are tools that have been around for, you know, more than a decade. About 10 years ago, I believe, because of their use is becoming more and more commonplace by government entities, you know, police, fire, for search and rescue and law enforcement purposes, that the Oregon State Legislature crafted legislation to restrict and put very clear guidelines for law enforcement agencies when they can and cannot use these. And that happened, like I say, I think about 10 years ago. Over that time, agencies around the state and around the country have been employing this technology and building best practices and training protocols. The FAA even has regulations for who can fly these, and there's a certified, you know, I forget the name of it because I'm not a drone person, but you basically have to get certified as a pilot of one of these things. It's not like a police officer can just go buy one at Best Buy and come out in the parking lot and start flying it around. There's a tremendous amount of documentation and training that has to go in to deploy in a program like this. And one of the things you have to have is a policy like the one in front of us. I will again go through this and kind of highlight some of the parts that I think people would have questions about. Only authorized operators are allowed to do this. And like I said, you have to get certified through the FAA. It's called the FAA Part 107 Remote Pilot Certification. So it's some testing that you have to do to be able to fly one of these things. When we can deploy these is very specific. So pursuant to a valid warrant authorizing its use as outlined in the Oregon State revised statutes, when there's probable cause to believe a person has committed a crime, is committing a crime, or about to commit a crime, and the exigent circumstances exist that make it unreasonable to obtain a warrant. An example of that would be something is happening right now, something just happened, or something is happening right now, or based on information we have that something is imminent, that it's about to happen. We can deploy it at that time without getting a warrant, because it'd be unreasonable for us to sit down at a computer, write a warrant, go to a judge, get it signed, and go through the whole process for that. So there are circumstances where we can fly it without a warrant, but we have to meet that standard of probable cause. When we're assisting somebody in an emergency, if we have reasonable belief, so that's a lesser standard than probable cause. If we have a reasonable belief that there is an imminent threat to the life and safety of someone, we can deploy it. But if we do that, we have to prepare a report documenting the factual basis for that. And within 48 hours of that emergency, we have to get a sworn statement filed with the court on what we did and why we did it. We can use it for purposes of reconstructing a crime scene. And one of the significant uses for this is accident reconstruction. So a lot of times if there's a tragedy, a fatal accident on a road, that road can sometimes be blocked for hours and hours and hours because of the processing of that crime scene to try to determine what happened. And there's some great technologies for doing that, but one of the uses for the drones has been to to basically take aerial digital images of this. And so that allows these crime scenes or traffic fatality scenes to be cleared much quicker. So we can get not just get the great information that'll help us essentially address this case as successfully as possible, but allow us to open up the streets quicker to create a little bit less of a disruption to the community. We'll talk a little bit about some of the prohibited uses. So what they cannot be used for, we cannot conduct random surveillance activities. We can't just put this thing up and just start flying it around looking for stuff to do. That's strictly prohibited. We can't target people based on their individual characteristics, of course, such as race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, disability, gender, housing status, or source of income. You can't, like I said, we can't just put these up without a good reason to fly them. We, of course, can't use them to harass or intimidate or discriminate against anybody. We can't conduct any kind of personal business with it, of course. And we are strictly prohibited by Oregon state law from weaponizing these. Now, that's a conversation that I know has come up in years past. People concerned that these will be weaponized, but police agencies are strictly prohibited by state law from doing just that. If we put them up, they are going to be clearly labeled where they will say Springfield Police on it, whether through the logo, the patch, or something like that. So if you're in your backyard, you have to see one go by. If it's an SPD drone, you should be able to identify that if it is one. Videos and photos are only going to be captured if there's a reasonable expectation that information will contain evidentiary value. Now, what I say is if we had to put it up for some reason, they would start recording when they believe something is going to happen that we need to capture as evidence. We don't just, the moment that it goes up in the air, start recording everything, because if you did that, you probably would start capturing things that you don't want to capture. So we're prohibited from turning that camera on and recording things until we believe there's going to be evidentiary data that could be captured. And if we do capture that data, it's handled under the same state mandated retention standards that anything else would be, whether it's body camera footage or photographs that the police take. It all falls under those same state standards. As I go through it here, a lot of it is just administrative stuff when training and things like that. So I'll kind of skip through that. All flights get a report documented, who flew, how long, for when. And it's not just that we filed the report. There's a program called Air Data that we subscribe to that documents every time that thing goes in the air, the exact path, location, altitude, how long it was in the air, where it went. And that is all recorded in there. So if somebody were to call the police and say, hey, I think the SPD drone was, watching my house, we can go pull all these logs and determine A, if it was ours that was even there, and B, if it was there, why was it there? There'll be a report log, how long it was in the air, the flight pattern, all that kind of stuff. So we can absolutely see every single time that these are deployed. The state also requires an annual report. And so every agency has to submit an annual report if they use these. And the annual report summarizes the frequency of use, the purposes of the use, and how the public can access the policies and procedures that the agency's operating under. So like all of our other policies, we'll post this on the city website, make it easily accessible so anybody can get on. This is just a draft form. We haven't signed it into effect yet. I think we're about ready to do that, but one of the things we want to do is bounce it off this group first. So when we sign that into effect, we will absolutely place that on the city website so anybody can access it and read it and review it. With that, I know you could talk for hours and hours about this program and pros and cons. It is a tremendous tool. I've seen it deployed in other places where it literally can save lives. And just for a typical example of something the police might encounter, they might get in a vehicle pursuit with somebody that just robbed a store at gunpoint. The person jumps out of the car at some point and they go running off into the night into somebody's backyards and in a neighborhood. We might have the neighborhood surrounded, but we don't know where this person is. So in the past, essentially the police will begin to search that area. But when you search that area, at some point you're going to encounter this person. You might encounter them when you least expect it. You might encounter them up close. You might encounter them before you have a chance to create distance and communicate. And then that might end up in a negative outcome for either the officer or the person that you're trying to find. Well, in that same scenario, if you have some kind of an airborne ability to just keep the officers back, and check the area with some of the technology they've got with the forward-looking infrared radar that can sense heat and those kind of things. You might be able to tell right where this person is hiding in a backyard, and you're still, potentially a block or, 100 yards away from it. And so that can allow you time to develop tactics. You can communicate with them. You could loud hail them. You can try other things rather than just finding yourself in an unexpected face-to-face confrontation with somebody that might turn violent. So it truly is a tool that can not just help keep the officers safe, but frankly, it can help keep some of the people safe that we're actually trying to arrest at some time.
I'm curious, how often have we used drones here in Springfield?
We haven't, because we haven't
Never.
got the policy in place yet.
So the policy had to be in place before it was used.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah.
we are not going to deploy any kind of new tool or anything like that until we have a policy that we have trained to in place to back it up.
Perfect. Okay.
The Eugene Police Department has had a drone team for, I believe, a number of years. In fact, they're recognized as one of the most technologically proficient and well-developed drone teams in the entire Northwest. We've reached out to them, and they are more than willing to partner with us. We're in the process of developing what we're going to call a metro drone team. So we might be able to call somebody from Eugene over here if one of our people is unavailable, and vice versa. If they need some help from us, we could send one of our people over there to help them. But rather than just starting the program from scratch, we really have the benefit of partnering with them to learn the lessons that they've already experienced over the years. So that's a great benefit to us for sure.
Very good. Other comments or questions from the committee? Brittany, you got it. I was waiting for you.
Thanks, Barry. I appreciate it. It's really awesome to hear that you all are partnering with Eugene on this. I'm wondering what other kind of like trainings, and sorry if I had to step out for a minute at the beginning, so my apologies if you already covered this, but what kind of trainings are officers receiving on the drones once the policy is in place?
Well, the pilots you're talking the pilots or the PD specific? As far as the pilots go, the pilots go to a monthly training, and we've been training with Eugene where they go out for a full day every month, and they practice technical proficiency. They review if there's new case law. They discuss, different deployments that might have happened around the region or even around the country, and pros and cons of what happened. So they're always training to do better. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to deploy one of those, it is up to that pilot whether or not it's appropriate to deploy it. Nobody can tell them what to do. The pilot is ultimately responsible for ensuring that we follow state and federal law and follow the policy and the guidelines. So there may be times when somebody thinks it might be a great tool and the pilot's like, no, we're not going to deploy it for that. It doesn't meet the guidelines. So that's kind of, if that answers your question. Yeah,
that's helpful. Thank you. And my last one I have, so about the drones, and I was honest, I thought we might get a little bit more public comment on this today, but I have heard a lot more concerns, just kind of like rumblings in the community about the drones, which I get. And so I'm just wondering if you're going to sit down with any like community partners or external groups to talk about this. Either, it's still in draft form now, but I guess just at any point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know it generates conversation. Absolutely. I think part of the reason why SPD has been on the sidelines for literally a decade in this discussion is to let a lot of this play out. And I think it has played out with agencies all over. A lot of the concerns people might raise now are concerns that have already been asked and answered at lots of other agencies and by the state legislature. Because I still heard somebody brought up about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, I was like, well, what if we put guns on them? What if they're weaponized? Not aware of the fact that we're prohibited from doing that. That was not somebody from internally, that was somebody from the community that brought that up. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there about it because it just hasn't been discussed here, I guess. But it is something that's been deployed around the country for a long time, very successfully. And I think we're seeing it more and more all the time. And it's not just in police departments either. Fire departments are using it. We can help with search and rescue, whether it's with fire department, sheriff's office, public works, and then go monitor. You can monitor dams, power stations, natural disaster kind of work. There's just an endless list of good uses that can benefit us all by this technology.
Anyone else from the committee have a question or comment? Very good. How about we go to then business from the committee? Chief, anything else that you have for us?
No, unless you have any questions, and if you think of something here in the next, before we're done, feel free to hit me back and I'll try to answer them for you.
Perfect. Just pausing a second to see if there is any other questions that anyone has from what we've discussed or any other topic for the chief while we have them right here. All right, let's go to business from the committee and want to talk about the committee annual report. I think, Jen, you're going to talk about that. And so for the three new committee members, can you just give a sense of what we've done and then kind of bring us up to speed?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. And I'm going to do this leaning heavily on my partner, Brittany. So keep me honest and make sure I'm capturing everything correctly, because I want to make sure that I get it right. It's been a lot of great work. So welcome to our three new committee members, just so that you are aware of where we're at. We have been invited as part of the City Council's revitalization of their committees and boards and commissions, and part of your inclusion on this committee. They're trying to standardize how their committees work and a lot of their roles. So we will be having a joint meeting with them in February. And one of the components is that we provide an annual report of our work. To the best of our knowledge on our current committee, that hasn't been something that this particular group has put together, that SPAC has crafted in quite some time. And no one currently on the committee, I believe, has been a part of one. So we're really excited. We know, and I'm sure that you're aware, which is part of what got you involved in our committee, that there's been a lot of changes. And this particular advisory committee has gone through a couple of new iterations in the last year. So as a part of that work, we went ahead and had a subcommittee doing some oversight, or compiling of that report, so that we could get a running head start and then bring it back to you all in a little bit. The subcommittee was comprised of Brittany, myself, and Michael Bean, who couldn't join us tonight. But we did meet since our last meeting and as a larger SPAC committee, and attempted to sort of break down how we were going to make this work. And what we decided was, first of all, that we recognize the breadth of work and the volume of changes that have occurred both in our committee and at the Springfield Police Department was really more of an 18-month look back rather than just the standard 12. So it became apparent that in about the summer of 2020, when we went online and we were virtual, that our community had an increased involvement and engagement in wanting to be advocates and vocal and involved in police activity, that there was a great deal of really high level incidents and turnover, et cetera. So that subcommittee proposed looking back at 18 months. So our report will actually compile for all of those months. And what we did then was we broke it out. So we decided that we would divide it all up, and our committee, each of the members took a series of months, and we worked to summarize the highlights. We wanted to make sure that we were capturing accurately the public comments, the number of public viewers. So I think that it's one of the things that we noticed was, for those of us that joined the committee just prior to the pandemic, when we sat in a room together all alone, there wasn't a great deal of public involvement. And then beginning last summer, we had interest in increase in viewers, which is, I think, the desire. So we compiled all of those. We began work on a draft of an executive summary that's going to just sort of summarize the multiple things that we've added, the committee members, the community input, and some of those really high level incidents and points of interest. And we have a little bit more refining before it is stage ready. And so what I think that we've committed to is another meeting after this to put a final bow on our presentation. We know that our meeting with the council is after our next February meeting. So we would like to come back to you all with sort of that final package so that you can review it, give us additional feedback. We'll dust it all off and be ready for our joint meeting. And I'm going to pause for a second, hand it over to Brittany, because then the final component in the way that we've organized our report was an executive summary of our work, the monthly highlights. And then we had one of the things that has been very evident in reviewing those 18 months is there's a desire to talk about what's next and what is the focus of this committee. I think there's been a very evident tension between this is really an advisory public committee and not necessarily a police commission or an oversight committee. And so, I think that our desire is to hear from you, our colleagues, about the next steps. So the final component is what Brittany is compiling for us. And so I'm gonna hand it over. Brittany, how did I do for summarizing?
That was great. Thank you. And thank you again for all your work. And also again, thanks to Michael, who's not here, for all of his work. We've all been grinding away doing it. But that was a great summary, Jen. And I think so in terms of, I was responsible for the next steps and discussion portion of the report. And I broke it down into kind of two components, and we discussed this with the subcommittee as well, but we broke it into questions for consideration and discussion. So we're hoping that as part of the presentation with council, we can engage in a bit of dialogue with them. And that in the two kind of subcomponents of the questions, we broke it up into committee membership, and then also getting kind of more clarity from them, like Jen was referencing before, in terms of the SPAC role. I think there's kind of confusion both internally for us and then also for the public in terms of what our committee's role is. And I think being able to engage in a discussion with that with council will be really insightful, hopefully for everyone. And then the other component is accountability and transparency, which has been, I think, a theme that we've been working on at least since I've been here. I think before then too, it's been a big part of the committee. And so we have a few questions pertaining to that. And I think Chief Shearer has done some really great work to continue to work towards that. And again, just kind of trying to converse with council, get their perspectives on it. And then the final component is our goals for 2022. So that's kind of how we're wrapping it up. And again, we'll talk about this more at our next meeting, but we're kind of thinking, we started drafting some goals, and obviously we'll pass it all with you all before we do anything, but I think want to start thinking about the long range plan. That's something that I don't know if we've engaged in that work recently really as well, and that is in our bylaws and in our charge pretty explicitly. And then continuing to encourage SPD to engage in public follow-up regarding cases, complaints, that sort of thing. And I think even just this employee relationships policy was a really great way of doing that. And I really appreciate, again, Chief Shearer being here for us to continue doing that. And then continue our policy review. Like we've been doing. I think we have 5 policies that are scheduled for review in the next year, and just continuing to do that work and kind of share that information with the public, and also ask our own questions. But if you all think of any goals, maybe start brainstorming some questions you might like to hear us ask council, and we're happy to include those in the documents, and we'll discuss them at our next meeting. Did I hit everything too there, Jenna?
I think so, yeah. I think the only thing that we just are really hoping to capture tonight from the larger committee is if there are things that you want to be sure that we are including in the look forward, are there any specific goals that you would like us to consider as a larger committee, so that those can be included in that report as well? I think the 3 of us, and Brittany did a phenomenal job summarizing that. I think that the 3 of us have put forward what we see both in our current committee charge and kind of the ongoing need of transparency. But from this committee group, the 3 of us don't want to plan our goals. So we want to hear from you all if there are other things that should be included.
I think Thank you, Jen and Brittany, and of course, Michael, for you guys are doing such great work. I'm wondering, I'm definitely open to taking some time to discuss and see if there are other goals. I think what also, when you have it written and we can see it, and we'll get it prior to next month's meeting, I think that'll help us even know, okay, you've already discussed this. And so I think we'll have even a more informed discussion next month is my thought. But wow, what a great job. So let's take a moment though. Questions for them. Does the process, does that make sense what we're trying to do? And do you have any goals or thoughts that you want to share at this time? Yes, Eric.
Just wanted to say thank you to the three of you for putting forth the effort to compile the draft report. Really excited to see it before our meeting next month, and echo Barry's comments about having an informed discussion about any additional goals or recommendations that we'd like to forward to council. But yeah, very excited. The content so far from your description sounds terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Terry, I think you had a hand that went up.
I did, but Eric just stole my whole thunder. So
Okay.
I'd like to thank the committee too, and look forward to seeing the written.
You bet.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
So it's our pleasure. I'm speak on behalf of us, I'm sure, but it was our pleasure. I think that it was actually really fulfilling to look back at the great body of work that this committee has done, that the police department, the strides that they have made, just in tandem. And again, our hope had been to get you a written copy this time. We want to make sure that we're honoring public records law and public meeting law. And so we tried to not have those edits happen outside of formal meetings. And we just need one more before I think we're ready to say, here we go. So we want to make sure that we're all in agreement about what we're putting in there. And hopefully we'll have that to you well in advance of the meeting so that you'll have a long time to chew on it and we'll be ready for a robust discussion.
I think that's great. I'll be fascinated just in the number of audience participation, as far as, because I don't ever see how many folks are engaged as we're online. So, but I know there were times that those numbers were very significant. And so I'll be interested in that. And has that been helpful as the audience has increased? And is there a way that we can continue to engage them and help them to feel like they've been heard? I thought tonight was a perfect example of how it can go well. It was a very positive call, but some fair questions. Chief Shearer was able to address those. I thought that was really ideal. So any way we can continue to enhance that, I think, is to the benefit of our committee and to the city's benefit as well.
I don't know if this is a question or a comment for that draft that you guys are working on. I previously was on BPAC, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And we did a lot of, we went out into the community. And so we were talking to people regularly. So when we came back, we had some of that information when community members didn't come to do public comment and questions. So is that something that we are going to be talking about in this draft? Is it something that we used to do and kind of we didn't have a really great look at it? Or is it something we really want to encourage more people to attend this meeting?
That is wonderful. In fact, I started scratching that down as Barry was talking as a note as well. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that has been a great desire of this committee for the last year, but we have had the additional restrictions of the coronavirus. So there hasn't been the opportunity. And we've heard several times Chief Shearer talk about his desire to gather and go out more into the community now that he's joined the department. And I'm hopeful that if we include that in a goal as a commitment for our committee, that we will own a little bit more of that as restrictions continue to lighten up. So that's an excellent goal. Thank you so much, Carla.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I've added it to my list for us to continue drafting. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Want to make sure I don't miss a hand or someone that has just a question or comment about this. Thank you again for the work you've done and the work you're going to be doing. And then we'll look forward to getting this from Jessica. And I would encourage all of us to spend some time reading through it, thinking about it, and then coming to the next meeting, prepared to have a discussion and trying to give input. And I do want to then just make sure everyone is aware, we do meet with the city council. Everyone on the team, on the committee is invited. That's 6 p.m. on Tuesday, February 22nd. Definitely, I'm hoping Brittany and Jen and Michael will be there, as they've done a lot of this work. Terry, I know you and I are asked to be a part of that for sure, but definitely want to include Jonathan and Adam and Carla as well to be a part, and Eric. So thank you. Have that in your mind, meeting with the council, February 22nd, 6 p.m. Jessica.
Hi, just from a support perspective, I was going to offer just to create a shell of a calendar invitation for that date and time. So it's on your calendar, and it won't contain the Zoom link that you would potentially receive from the city manager's office, but really it's just so that you have something on your calendar. Is that acceptable? Excellent. And you can decline it and you won't hurt my feelings if it's not something you want on there. So just a heads up.
Perfect. I do want to take a moment. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. And we are grateful to have you as a part of this committee as well. And would love it if you're willing just to say a word or two about yourself, and give us a chance to just say again, thank you for being a part of this team.
Yes, thank you. You're quite welcome. I'm a member of the Oregon Fire Service Honor Guard. We had a memorial service in Tualatin today that went over a little bit, so I was a little bit late, so I apologize about that. Thankful that I got a little reminder call, but I literally just gotten back into Springfield, and so I logged in when I could, and my camera was off for most of the meeting because I was holding my phone up to my ears so I could hear. So I didn't want you to think I was being rude or anything about that. So I am a firefighter paramedic with Eugene Springfield Fire, and I currently am in the training section. So I work Monday through Friday typically. So making meetings like this normally won't be a conflict or anything like that. We work a lot with Springfield Police. Oftentimes when I go to Station 5, going on or off duty, we have a chance to talk to some of the officers' relationship there. I will say, don't tell the Eugene guys, but it's much better than the Eugene police. The officers are much friendlier, and if we have a need, they are much more likely to respond to that rapidly, which is always appreciated. So we're going to try to hopefully that rubs off on those Eugene guys. But we have a good relationship with departments, but I've always appreciated the difference between the cities as far as the police. So I'm very excited about being able to do something to contribute to help our Springfield Police Department remain at a high level while we're providing good service to the community and service to our officers as well. I wanted to make sure that was a priority. That was another reason I wanted to join the committee, not just to, as an oversight for the police, but just to make sure that they have what they need to go home every night and do their job well. So I'm really excited moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. I again appreciate everyone on our team and our 3 new committee members. Grateful to have you on board and excited to get a chance to work together. We always take a few moments at the end just to say, is there any other business that needs to come from the committee? Any questions or concerns committee members have? Now's a good opportunity for you to either share that, ask the question. So I'll just open that up for before we close. Any other business from committee members? I always, sometimes I miss hands, so I always pause to make sure I look well. Okay, I do not see any other business or any other questions coming up. We will, again, reminder, you will get the information about our annual report, and we'll look through that, and then we will be meeting the first Thursday Day in February, have that discussion plus what other business is before us. And then again, the reminder for the February 22nd meeting. So with that, it is 6:55 and this meeting is going to be coming to an end, and we will finish up at this time. Thank you.
Everyone.
Good night, everyone.